Joining our conversation now is Congressman Robert Garcia. He's a Democrat from California and a Biden campaign surrogate. It's so good to have you in the House, Congressman. So how about those shovel-ready projects that all those Republicans out there taking credit for, right?
No, I mean, listen, Republicans have been taking credit on Twitter, on social media for all these projects in their districts, and the president's delivered, and he delivered huge tonight. I mean, just the energy, the vision, just the looking forward. You could feel it in the room. I think that all of my colleagues, I mean, the Democrats were really excited to hear the president lay out a vision for the future, not just to talk about those infrastructure projects, lowering the price of insulin, all the things that he has done, but he actually focused on the future. And that was something that for us was really important tonight.
I mean, you talk about the future. We can play this. What he talked about on housing, which Alicia talks about this all the time, that housing is something that is right in front of the American people that everyone's dealing with. The rent is too damn high. It's very expensive to buy a house. If you got money, you can buy a house. You feel broke. I want to play this for you all about the president talking about the cost of housing.
I know the cost of housing is so important to you. If inflation keeps coming down, mortgage rates will come down as well. And the Fed acknowledges that. But I'm not waiting. I want to provide an annual tax credit that will give Americans $400 a month for the next 2 years as mortgage rates come down, to put toward their mortgages when they buy their first home or trade up for a little more space. Just for 2 years.
Often when Americans express a dissatisfaction with the economy, really what they're talking about is affordability, and housing is one of the key pillars of that affordability. That's too often, we tend to talk about eggs, we talk about gas. We don't talk about one of the baseline spending, which is your housing. And one of the things I have heard said by housing experts is, this is about feeling secure, that if you cannot put a roof over your family's head, if you cannot guarantee your family's housing, then you feel personally like a failure and you feel insecure at the most base level.
And this was actually, for me, one of the highlights of the speech. For folks across the country, they know that people are talking about the cost of housing. And not only did the president address homeownership, which we know is the key to the American dream, we want everyone to be able to own a home. He talked about renters. He talked about the rent, how expensive it is for folks to get by, how expensive it is for families to pay the rent. And so people wanted to hear the president talk about housing, talking about the rent being too damn high, and he did that tonight. That is going to be a home run part of the speech for working families across the country. And the fact that he stuck to these kind of kitchen table issues around housing, health care, insulin, I think that's going to resonate. I think you're going to hear a lot of working families tonight just be very satisfied with the Biden speech.
Because they're hearing the policy.
Yeah.
There were some other things in the speech.
There were.
That were not, I think, written down. We talked on camera about Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, and the buttons that she had and the outfit that was a violation. When the president came down the aisle and was greeting folks, she greeted him, gave him a button. There was a point in the speech where he pulled out the button on literally this speech had everything. It had props. Pulls out this button and says the name of the young man who was killed in Georgia that I think Marjorie Taylor Greene and other Republicans were going to use that as a foil. And he was killed by an undocumented woman. And so, but the president used the term illegal when he was responding in the heat of the moment. I heard the word illegal. There were people in my text messages that heard the word illegal. I wonder what you thought about that moment.
I mean, two things. First, one is Marjorie Taylor Greene is a disgrace. And the fact that she pulled that stunt, wore that hat, was so disrespectful. She should have not been allowed to do that. And that is actually shameful what she did. I mean, just completely gross. Look, I agree. I mean,
and to be clear, it was a woman who was killed.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. And look, I wouldn't have used the word illegal. I think the president, though, quickly shifted. He began talking about immigrants right after that. I think that as an immigrant myself, I think I was heartened to hear the president talk about the importance of immigrants and to push back on Donald Trump and his rhetoric, essentially calling us for some that were somehow poisoning the blood of this country. And so I think that I think he shifted off that. That's not a word that anyone should use to describe anybody. And I think it's unfortunate that Republicans are trying to create wedges, especially in issues around immigration. At the end of the day, the president wants to help secure and fix the border. The president wants an immigration proposal, and that's what we should be focused on.
All right. All right. The congressman has spoken. Congressman Robert Garcia, thank you very much for joining us at the table. Appreciate you.
Thank you.